Hello and welcome to another episode of Beyond Top 10 Tennis. My name is Dr. Ashley Morgan Berge and I'm your host. I'm the author of 11 books, a CEO of 12 years, a startup founder that looked at rivaling the likes of Facebook, Instagram, Twitter and LinkedIn set on data privacy. I am an elite performance coach, near on 18 plus years, having worked with some exceptional athletes throughout Europe, America, Australia and beyond. And most profoundly, I am the world's leading scientist on coach and athlete performance. I have used tennis as a blueprint that has uncovered how to develop a top 10 ranking. I will say that again in a different way, that I am actually, in fact, the world's leading authority in tennis when it comes to developing a top 10 ranking, which essentially means that my work was responsible for uncovering a landmark finding, a first in the sporting world, and something that a lot of tennis players and coaches and parents alike have been searching for such a long time, and that is the pathway on how to specifically develop and achieve a top 10 ranking and top 10 player respectively. I am behind such theories as the optimal performance theory, the V by Dr. B to the rule of transference. I have coined such terms from the barrier breaker to the golden rule. And as has become custom with each episode, I'm going to dive into one of our books and really dig in a bit deeper and share new insights. Now, the book we've been focusing on, and this is episode 11, is The Secrets to Optimal Performance Success, a comprehensive discussion on developing elite coaches and players. And today's episode is really going to look at the idea of motivation, and we're going to just have a really nice talk around that, gather some new insights, and hopefully get those minds ticking and thinking to just look at new approaches, additional insights, and new practices you can implement in your own training loads to coaching practices. Today's episode is on 2.4 motivation of the right kind for athletes. If you'd like to follow along, we're on page 76. And as has become custom, I'm going to read a small snippet and then we're going to dive in and keep going from there. All right. As a support act to an athlete, irrespective of their standard, what stage they are progressing at, or whatever their competitive objectives or their goals may be, the kind of motivation you choose to deliver can either hinder their performance or act as a catalyst for the athlete. Now, this is such an important topic, and first I will touch on, my own experience, and that's where all of this comes from, whether it's from my background as an elite player, having played in the NCAA, full scholarship, full rides, all of the above, having played in, Australia, Europe, and the United States, succumbing to injury. And what has happened throughout that time was experiencing not only different motivational factors, but also those of the coach I was at the time and how they worked for me, and those in my team and how they worked for me. Now, this also corresponds around that time becoming an elite performance coach, which also means when it comes to the coaching world and those standards to qualifications, I am the best, which means that not only do I have the level 3, which has been touched on in previous episodes, that's also obviously backed up by the undergraduate, the master's, and obviously the PhD that has cemented my place as the world's leading authority when it comes to tennis and developing top 10 rankings. Now, the number of players I've worked with over the years to fine-tune their game has not only been incredibly rewarding, it's also been incredibly insightful from learning and also gauging different motivational factors. And essentially that means no individual is the same. And we know that from, again, a humanized standpoint, and we like saying an individual is also a human, and that is the tennis player and or athlete. So it's incredibly important to humanize the approach, to not always consider that athlete or player as just an athlete or player. They are also a human being, which means they have their own idiosyncrasies, their own different characteristics, and whether they're introvert and extrovert, a mix of the two. Each athlete or player has their own qualities that it's integral for a coach to acknowledge, to accommodate, and really integrate within that coach-athlete relationship. Now, when it comes to motivation, it's up to that open dialogue to begin with, and not just viewing it as simple as support. Motivation can be, it comes in different forms, whether it's that prior planning, the really long-term planning, could be short-term as well, those little goals that you're looking towards, whether they're performance-specific or result-specific. And it's really, having your finger on the pulse in that respect. As a direct consequence of this catalyst, their performances are undeniably enhanced in multiple ways. The idea of motivation itself is relatively easy to grasp, although the type of motivation, how it is delivered, or the object of motivation is key. Now, this is, again, incredibly important because you really need to ask yourself, why are you motivating the athlete or player? And what is your reason behind that motivation? It's incredibly important to be conscious of whether it is aligned with a performance and or a result. Because if that player, athlete, or for the parents, the child, assimilates a good reward with a good outcome, sure, they want to keep doing it. But then ask yourself, if there's not the desired outcome and nothing is said, then they really tie their value, which then is tied to their self-worth, to their performance. And once we start doing that, that is an incredibly troublesome area and problematic area to dive into, and it really needs a lot more unpacking and reconditioning. And you know what? To prevent that from happening, why not build those sound, healthy foundations from the beginning? Because if we're able to do that, not only does that empower the athlete, it empowers the coach, it empowers the parent or guardian, and just everyone involved, and it sets a healthier outset from the very beginning. Get the message of intent wrong or skewed, and instead of delivering a catalyst to the athlete, you may very well be responsible for demoting their performances, which is essentially what was just touched on. Because irregardless of what your message is and the intention behind that, let's be honest, when we're dealing with players or athletes, and it doesn't matter what sport you're in, they're sensitive. And that sensitivity, index, it can be low, it can be incredibly high, but you know what? That is incredibly normal. But it's important for that coach or the parent or the guardian to be mindful of that. But also, there's a fine line, where an athlete or player will again associate their worth, their value to their performance. And you know what? If you have a 12-year-old competing against 16-year-olds and they're losing every single week, just for example, their self-worth is really going to be knocked around. But it works both ways. If that 16-year-old is the one on the losing end, they really could end up thinking really poorly of themselves, but that's just not the case. If we value an outcome on someone's performance, that's good, that's great, but we have to be so careful not to tie the person, the individual, and their self-worth towards the result. Too often I see parents thinking their child is not playing hard enough. Maybe they should pull them away from the sport because their results are not showing. And unfortunately, and fortunately, I was one of those players that did not have that support, the motivation that I was receiving. It just was not there, and it was not something that I responded to. And that is why with a lot of my work, the experience has been incredibly powerful, but also to you, to let you know that I've been there and it's okay, irrespective if you're performing exceptionally well or not, because I've been on both ends, which means there's a very good chance you have too. And it's so important, whether you are the player or the coach or the parent, to be mindful of that assimilation there, an athlete's self-worth, and how it really is tied into motivation, which in hindsight may be, straightforward. You think, no, that's not, it's a completely different topic. However, you'll be so surprised how little things such as motivations and self-worth are all tied in together. And the benefit of that is that we can really look at empowering the athlete as a whole when we become more mindful of this interconnectedness. How's that? Okay. And if we look at how they're all interconnected, it not only empowers again, I guess, the whole triangular approach when we're looking at that framework behind that parent-coach relationship, the coach-athlete relationship, and just how they all integrate in the best possible way. If we're really talking about that long-term pathway towards that top 10 ranking. And let's be honest, before you can get even a little bit close to that top 10 ranking, you need to embark on that professional tour to begin with, towards that top 500 ranking, to 300, to top 100 ranking, and so forth. And before you begin as a professional player, you need to build the foundations. And those foundations begin in the prior to your adolescent years, and even so much more important in your adolescent years, where we're also looking at mitigating injuries so you can continue through the pathway, which again, that's all on AM8 or AMA International. And when we look at those pathways, we look at the long game, the one common theme that keeps an athlete or that player present and active is that motivation. What is their motivation? What keeps them on the court? And unfortunately, there is a significant gap when we look at older adolescents and their participation rates. They fall off. And we've touched on this before. The underlying reason why they fall off, it's twofold. Not only is it more often than not the development of an injury, unfortunately, due to poor technical parameters, it is also because of that motivation. And the motivation, it becomes nearly non-existent. It's just not there. And again, unfortunately, too often than not, it's because that coach is not conscious of their motivating factors. Likewise with the parent and or guardian. So if you can really get to the root of a player's or athlete's motivation and really just fine-tune that, keep in tune with it, in sync with that, so everyone's on the same page, you increase that likelihood to that initial motivating factor to be sustained. If it's not sustained, you're putting in 5, 6, 7 years of hard work, all to see, no, that athlete or player does not reach that 10-year milestone, they stop. Now, if you want to keep that going, 10 years, 12 years, 15, and if you're looking at that 8-year-old that's playing, 9, 10-year-old, you need that 10-year pathway before they embark on or consider becoming a professional. In that 15 years, that's when we're looking at that 25 plus age group where they're beginning to really peak and find their peak performances, which delivers an optimal performance. And that's where they're best positioned to enter that top 10, to cross the threshold, but equally to represent and align with the golden rule, which essentially assimilates with a Grand Slam championship. More things in there too, though that's not the point, but also they're poised for replicated success, which is another term that's been coined, though replicated success, we know, as far as science is concerned and statistics and everything, all the good things there, when we're looking at ATP and WTA tour players, we actually know now, and again with that motivating underlining factor, that one Grand Slam championship, you can get there, but we are looking at replicated success denotes more than one, and we actually know the likelihood of one Grand Slam championship turning into 2 or more, and we even know the time frames there, which means this is so powerful, and it's just so pivotal that if you hold on to and you integrate that motivating factor and or factors into your coaching pedagogy, which previously has been touched on, though, think about your framework, your values, your core focuses that really underpins what you're doing on court or the field, or irrespective where you are with your player or athlete. You're positioning yourself as a team, as a unit towards that long game. And it really starts with, believe it or not, being conscious of motivation and knowing those underlying factors. And how cool is that? Knowing that if you are conscious of what motivates your athlete, just to begin with, something so simple, it's something you really can leverage and keep a hold of, keep a head of, keep a grasp of. If you're really looking at heading towards becoming not only a professional tennis player or in another sport, it's obviously cross-sectional, but also most specifically a top 10 ranking. In order to be a support act for an athlete, that in itself suggests you genuinely want to help their performances in any way you can through vocalizing this support. How you go about communicating this type of motivation is just as important as what you choose to communicate in the first place. Now, this is a little bit funny, and I say that personally because I remember as a budding player coming up, I had my dad sidelined, and I was so excited that he came to watch me practice. I'm so excited because normally that just was not the case back then, or maybe it's not for a lot of you out there, and that's okay. And sure, and it was just practice. And a part of me was actually quite nervous, but another part was super embarrassed. And then, yes, my dad did the unthinkable. He started clapping really, really loudly and cheering. And as a teenager, as that adolescent, I was absolutely mortified. And so the performance I was hoping to put on to show my dad how good I was, no. That did not happen. That is obviously not what he saw. And, soon enough, obviously those claps stopped, unfortunately, because I guess that refers or goes back to what we were talking about, that, again, that reward is associated with that positive performance. And if you were conscious of that, which, let's be honest, most people aren't, but if you're listening, you're getting a head start. You're able to position yourself to not direct that feedback or that positive feedback simply just with a positive performance. Now, for the parents and coaches out there, it's really about learning who your player is, who that athlete is, and how your child best responds, whether it is showing up to every lesson, every event, every tournament, and just sitting there and not saying anything, or doing the same and yelling your lungs out. Okay? I cannot tell you how many parents I have come across over the years that scream and shout at their players, because that's just how they are, and that's what they want. That's what they would have wanted when they were younger and when they were participating and playing. And you know what? Their child is the exact opposite. And so that child is, of course, absolutely mortified, but not responsive whatsoever. And they really do not resonate with that yelling or shouting, and it does not do them any good. It is not a motivating factor. So on the flip side, you have that parent, that guardian, just cheering on, thinking or hoping, I guess, that their message is being perceived in the right context, that they're there and they love them, they're cheering for them, they're so proud of them. Where that child, no, that is not the message they're getting. For some, it could be like, are they trying to make me play bad? Are they not supporting me? Why do they not understand me? And many other, I guess, scenarios or outcomes. And that really obviously brings it down to getting to know, well, obviously your child, but as the coach, knowing how they perform, what they respond best to, and keeping that open dialogue with the parent or guardian to share that. And, you know, again, looking at that humanized approach, a child is not going to respond the same in the classroom as they do on the court or the field or in the pool. It could be complete opposites. For some, it's exactly the same. Others, complete opposites. Okay? And they could be just stark differences, and that's okay. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. Quite often you see the quiet person at school and they're louder on the court. You see quiet and quiet also, and loud also. And you know what? There is nothing. There is absolutely zero correlation between that and performance outcomes. So for the parents and coaches out there, it is okay if your child, if your athlete, if the player is just more quiet. It's okay. Athletes are like everyone else. They value words of support. However, unlike the non-athlete, athletes can hold on to words or phrases of motivation, speech that has been communicated to them, which is then used as a tool of motivation, if it is of the right kind. That is really important. Maybe you're familiar and you've experienced this yourself. I know I sure have or had as an athlete. And it could be, especially for that child with the parent, just those motivating words, and they're going to hold on to that. And you don't know how long they hold on to it for. I have words, for example, that I still hold on to that my mum told me, I have to say, probably close to 20 years ago. And it's the same applies in a different context for that player and that athlete. So parents out there, please be careful with your words. But you know what? Coaches, you do not get off the hook, because I still remember words from coaches that long ago. And some of them are good, but others, they're not so good. And which means it begs the question, is that one, are you conscious of your words? And two, make them count. Make sure there's a purpose with a genuine intent there. And I'm sure everyone's heard this saying. Everyone, I know my parents told me this over and over again. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it at all. And that is so true when you are dealing with an adolescent, a child, or a maturing young adult. When it comes to something insofar as their dreams, and we're talking about sport here, becoming a professional. And there are a lot of kids out there that play sport because they want to become a professional, which is incredible. And if you really look at it, every single child out there genuinely has the potential. Where it goes wrong is that they just don't have access to the right guidance or those that guide them, let's say they're just not on the right path. Now, that has nothing to do with belittling or being negative about a child's dream. And again, I speak to this or about this from a place of such an open heart because, again, this is something I experienced as well. And it was heartbreaking. Though, you know what? Sure, I kept going, but it doesn't make it any less heartbreaking that it was done and said. So for the parents and coaches out there, ask yourself, who are you to tell a child they cannot accomplish it? Maybe, just maybe, you're allowed to put your hand up and say, I know you want to get there, but I don't know how. Be the adult. Be honest and open. And I know I've touched on this in previous episodes, but it's so important out there. If you don't know how, let them know. Be honest, because you know what? Kids, they're smarter than we think, and we really should give them more credit. And when we're talking about something as valuable, as priceless as their dreams, let's guide them in the right direction. That's the best that we can do. It is up to that player, the athlete, the child to put that hard work in, to be able to listen, retain that information, to learn, to become more knowledgeable, just to practice, to condition, to recondition, to build those foundations, and also to look at their mental side, their mental stability, to put in that mental training. There's so much more than just one thing. Now, if we can guide these players, these athletes, these children within and in that right direction, then we're leading them towards that potential of genuinely accomplishing those lofty goals, those dreams. And the best part is we now know, we scientifically now know, which is incredible, that they can, that the pathways are there, they can. And it really starts with that education. And I think it's so important to draw it back to motivation and that underlying factor. And we're looking at the right kind of motivation again, and what works best for that athlete, for the player, for that child. And it gets down to understanding them. If you get the chance to know them, find out what makes them tick, you can leverage that. That is such a powerful tool. And each coach out there, every single parent or guardian, that is magic. It allows you to motivate your child, your player, your athlete with the best intentions. And when we're looking at that, I don't think there's just anything better. And we're really going to just finish today's episode on that, because again, if we're looking at motivation, ask yourself, it's such a simple question. Tell me, what motivates you? Whatever you do in your life, specifically for the coaches out there, what motivates you? I'm hoping what motivates you is obviously teaching those kids, the players, the athletes to learn and get better. I hope. But I also hope it's about upskilling to make sure you've got the tools to do that. And let's have, I guess, a check on that to make sure whatever you learned 10 years ago, there's new. Okay, it has been updated, because this work that I'm talking about has only become available in the last couple of years. 10 years ago, I was doing the work, and it has taken that long, the last decade, to get it out, to fine tune it, and to just bring it, to breathe life into it. And that's where Beyond Top 10 Tennis has come to fruition. And it's so important if that is your motivating factor. For the parents out there, if your motivating factor is to give your child or children the best hope to achieve those dreams in their sport of choice, now you know. And for everyone else listening, for the players, especially in athletes. Whatever your motivation is, just ask yourself what it is, why you do what you do, and to keep track of that. Because let's be honest, whatever motivates you now, there's a very good chance in 3 months it's not going to motivate you, because goals change. And I think that's the secret there. And we'll end on that goals change, goals build, they get even bigger and better and scarier. And if we're really looking at it, at the end of the day, we can really set that goal towards a top 10 tennis ranking and keep that motivation just ignited to get there. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I really hope you enjoyed it. Motivation, it's such a simple topic on one hand, but there are so many offshoots on the other, which makes it just a really interesting topic to dive into. If you'd like to get a copy of The Secrets to Optimal Performance Success, please head on over to AM8. That's am8international.com. For any comments or questions, please leave them there, or head on over to Topic Thread. That's topicthread.com. That's the only social network I'm on. And for something different, head on over to Pink Octopus Books. That's actually where my fictional release is. All of the links I will leave in the episode notes, in the bio. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, follow, like, would be absolutely phenomenal. That would just wonderful. And for those of you who have already, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. With that, we'll wrap today up, and I'm just so grateful for you tuning in. I'm your host, Dr. Ashley Morgan Berge, and this is Beyond Top 10 Tennis, and I'll see you next time.